الله يوفقكم.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Lebanese forces leader Samir Geagea announces his presidential program focusing on restoring the authority of the state against the proliferation of weapons. The Syndicate Coordination Committee holds a protest near the Education Ministry in Beirut's UNESCO area to pressure MPs into approving the new wage scale. And hundreds of passengers remain missing several hours after a South Korean passenger ferry sank with 475 passengers on board. Lebanese forces leader Samir Geagea announces his presidential program that focuses on restoring the authority of the state against the proliferation of weapons during a time of regional unrest. He declares that no country in the world would accept that its authority be subjected to armed groups that exist outside of the state and stresses there will be no compromise in dealing with the spread of arms. He believes the main challenge lies in committing to the Ta'af Accord as a means to implement the constitution and achieve national balance. In addition, he calls for introducing reform at state security institutions, which he says are still subject to the influence of Syrian hegemony, despite the Syrian troop withdrawal in 2005. Geagea pledges to develop Lebanon's ports and airports, saying it is no longer acceptable for the country to only have one functioning airport. He pledges to tackle corruption without sparing civil, military and religious institutions, even if new laws have to be put in place to this end. Speaker Nabih Berri calls for parliamentary session to elect a new president on the 23rd of this month. Berri says that a candidate should receive 2/3 of the votes to win in the first round of elections and 65 votes of the 128-member parliament to win in the second round. President Michel Sleiman's 6-year term ends on May the 25th, but the constitutional deadline for Parliament to start convening to elect a new head of state started on March the 25th. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Rahi, who has repeatedly called on Berri to implement a session to avoid a vacuum, received a phone call from the speaker informing him about his decision. Berri and al-Rahi discussed the presidential elections and the latest developments in the country. President Michel Sleiman calls on all parties to guarantee the appropriate atmosphere to avoid vacuum, as Parliament is expected to convene next week to elect a new head of state. The President told Prime Minister Tamam Slam and the cabinet ministers that he was satisfied with the security plan implemented in the northern city of Tripoli and the eastern Bekaa Valley. He also urges all agencies to coordinate to open a road for the remote border village of El Tufail. He also called for security measures to protect holy sites during Easter. The cabinet appointed Fatima Sayer Rawaidat, the new head of the Civil Service Council, and granted Rafiq Hariri University Hospital a loan worth 20 billion Lebanese pounds. The Syndicate Coordination Committee has held a protest near the Education Ministry in Beirut's UNESCO area to pressure MPs into approving the new wage scale. Similar sit-ins were held near government headquarters in different cities, including Tripoli, Tyre and Zahle, a day after the legislator failed to decide on the wage scale. Beirut's protesters unleashed their rage at several lawmakers who on Tuesday voted in favor of a proposal to form a parliamentary committee to reconsider the draft law. Several parliamentary blocs have expressed fears that Lebanon's economy will collapse if the appropriate means to fund the pay hike were not found. U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale has visited the Mufti Shahar in Tripoli. Hale says his country welcomes the Lebanese government's success with a new security plan in Tripoli and in the Bekaa, and reiterates the United States' support to the government, security forces and people who work toward peace.
Well, I'm very happy to be back in Tripoli. For me, this is a wonderful opportunity to meet with His Eminence the Mufti. I appreciate his hospitality in receiving me here in his home. I learned today his point of view, and obviously I recognize his very deep concern for the people of Tripoli, the people of the north, indeed the people of all of Lebanon. For me personally, this is also an important visit. I first came to Tripoli in 1992 when I was a young political officer at our embassy in Beirut. And I came back many, many times, and I learned through firsthand experience what an impressive culture, what a proud history this city has, its great diversity as well, and that it's a peace-loving city, one that emphasizes tolerance. And so we're very pleased that the government has adopted an impressive security plan, thanks to wise leadership by President Sulaiman and by the Prime Minister. And we're seeing the Lebanese armed forces and the internal security forces doing their job with courage and dedication and professionalism to implement that plan. And I think we'll see results over time. And we've seen them already. I also, though, have learned that, frankly, security alone is not the answer. To consolidate those gains, there also needs to be attention paid to the economic needs of the city, the infrastructure needs, the developmental needs as well. And the United States wants to be a strong partner, not just on the security side, where we've contributed over $1 billion in the last 9 years, but also on the developmental side. So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Lebanon's telecommunications minister Boutros Harib says the country will lower internet prices and improve speed after cutting landline and mobile call prices by up to half this month to boost consumption and ease pressure on consumers. A country of about 4 million people, Lebanon has some of the world's highest mobile phone service prices. The service is often spotty. Critics blame mismanagement, political disputes, corruption, and a government monopoly on infrastructure. The slow and costly internet is one of the main obstacles for businesses in the country. Analysts say it has inhibited economic growth at a time Lebanon is suffering from fallout of the war in neighboring Syria, which hit tourism and investment. Harib says he is working to lower prices to improve quality to stimulate the economy more broadly. The funeral of an Al-Manar technician, Halim Alaw, killed in Syria earlier this week, was held in his hometown of Hirmel in East Lebanon, with hundreds of mourners turning out to pay their respects. The funeral procession started from the Hirmel's Martyrs Square as hundreds carried the coffin of the deceased. Alaw was among the 3 of Al-Manar staff who were covering the Syrian army's takeover of the town of Ma'lula in Syria's Kalamoun region when their vehicle came under heavy fire on Monday. Members of the United Nations Security Council have viewed graphic pictures taken in Syria by a former military police photographer that showed what appeared to be evidence of brutal torture, including strangulation and long-term starvation. The informal council meeting was organized by France to give the 15 member states a chance to see some of the 55,000 photographs that former war crimes prosecutors have described as clear evidence of systematic torture and mass killings in Syria's 3-year-long civil war. French UN Ambassador Gérard Araud told reporters that it was important for the Security Council to see such horrific images as his delegation prepares a resolution that would refer the Syrian conflict to the International Criminal Court for possible war crime indictments. And coming up next, Israeli police wound dozens of Palestinians near Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Jordanian Air Force fighter jets destroyed a number of combat vehicles as they tried to enter the kingdom from war-hit Syria by crossing the border. A Syrian military source, however, says the vehicles that were struck did not belong to Syria's armed forces. Damascus has accused Amman of backing the 3-year uprising against President Bashar al-Assad by training and arming rebels, but Jordan denies this and says it has tightened its border and jailed dozens trying to cross it illegally. Israeli police have wounded dozens of Palestinians with stun grenade canisters and rubber-coated bullets after opening Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound to Jewish visitors. Today's clashes are the second this week after Israeli police similarly opened the compound to non-Muslim visitors on Sunday. Many Palestinians already wounded from the attacks stayed inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque out of fear they would be arrested when leaving. Israeli police state that Palestinians threw stones and firecrackers at police after the walled compound's gates had been opened. The police retaliated by firing stun grenades and rubber-coated steel bullets at the Palestinians. The compound in Jerusalem's Old City is revered as a location of the biblical Jewish temples and is considered Judaism's holiest place. It also houses the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. Pro-Russian armed men have taken control of Ukrainian troop carriers that were driven into the eastern Ukrainian city of Slovyansk. The news comes as Ukraine's defense ministry says a pro-Russian armed group has taken 2 of its soldiers hostage in the separatist eastern region of Lugansk. The ministry says an officer and a soldier were seized by extremists and taken to an unknown destination after they pulled over to repair their vehicle. Ukraine's Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk has angrily reacted to the latest developments, telling his cabinet that Russia is exporting terrorism to his country. Hundreds of passengers remained missing several hours after the South Korean passenger ferry sank with 475 passengers on board about 100 kilometers south of the Korean peninsula. About 180 passengers, including high school students, were plucked to safety in today's dramatic rescue, although at least 2 people had died. Reporters on the ground say at least 290 passengers are still missing. The 2 passengers who are reported dead are a crew member and a teenage student. A man has been taken into custody for possessing a hoax device after being found with a rice cooker in his backpack following a first anniversary tribute near the Boston Marathon finish line. Boston police say the man was stopped last night by an officer who saw him acting suspiciously. He says the man dropped the backpack. The incident occurred close to where 3 people died and more than 260 others were injured a year ago when 2 bombs exploded near the marathon's finish line on April the 15th of 2013. Those bombs were made from pressure cookers packed with explosives, nails and other shrapnel that were concealed in backpacks. Police say the man involved in Tuesday's hoax also faced charges of disturbing the peace and disorderly conduct. The backpack was blown up by the bomb squad as a precaution, as was a second unattended backpack found nearby. Google Glass, which hit the market in the United States this week, has aroused public concern over the security and privacy of users and the public. Consumer Watchdog, a California-based nonprofit consumer education and advocacy organization, has released a report showing the potential harm of Google Glass to the privacy, health and personal safety of the public, as anyone can be recorded by people wearing glass without realizing it. Consumer Watchdog stated that when wearing Google Glass, the user's ATM PIN number would never be safe, and the privacy of the user's family, friends could also be invaded. In addition, videos taken by Google Glass can be obtained by Google for commercial use. The NGO advocates that users who are wearing glass effectively become a set of eyes for Google.
Button, but I am. I'm watching you watch me, and anywhere you go with a pair of glass, that happens. When you wear these devices, you think you're wearing it, but really glass is wearing you. Google is wearing you. You're becoming a set of eyes for Google. And Google has 98% of its revenue coming from advertising and marketing. It wants to know everything about you and your friends and your family and everyone you come in contact with, because it wants to target you and your friends and your family with products that the corporations that pay it want to sell you. Suddenly, if you start to pick up a pair of glass for $1,500 today, you suddenly become eyes for Google and give it more insight than it really deserves into our world. So we're hoping people take our advice and leave glass where it is. And
don't become a glass.
Don't become a glass also.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Lebanese forces leader Samir Jaja announces his presidential program focusing on restoring the authority of the state against the proliferation of weapons. The Syndicate Coordination Committee holds a protest near the Education Ministry in Beirut's UNESCO area to pressure MPs into approving the new wage scale. And finally, hundreds of passengers remain missing several hours after a South Korean passenger ferry sank with 475 passengers on board. Those are your midweek headlines from this Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates. Take care.
هيدا حقكم وحصلتوا عليه، الله يوفقكم.